here.
Can we do roll call?
Yes. All right. Aaron Angel,
Here.
Scott Conlon,
Here.
Thomas Davis,
Here.
Sam Libby,
Here.
Hannah Mulroy,
Here.
Nicholas Novello is not here, Brandy Bradshaw Reyes,
Here.
and Council Liaison Sean McCoy is not here.
We'll be here.
He will be here later on.
Yep.
Yes.
All right, so let's start things off. Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Hannah. I'm just going to say a little thing from the outset as this is my first night running things. Our usual chair, Nick Novello, had a baby and we have this month, which is great news, but I do ask some patience while I chair my first meeting of Parks Recreation. I do have some advisory board experience, but haven't chaired a whole lot, so bear with me. I want to do a little, details about what we're going to do today. Is the public invited to be heard is the second item. That's going to be items related to things that are not on the agenda. So most of you are here for something that's on the agenda, the land exchange. We will hear public to be heard at the end of that item. So we're going to have a staff presentation, board questions, then we're going to invite the public to be heard 3 minutes each. Please sign in with Veronica if you'd like to speak, and then we'll come back to the board for discussion and deliberation. So I'm going to open public to be heard with items not on the agenda. So assuming no one has signed in for that, we're going to move to the next item. Okay. Next item, the items I'm here to talk about today is the Distal Tall Land Exchange and public hearing. We're going to start with Chris to do a staff presentation for about 20 minutes or so.
Thank you very much. Board, I'm Chris Helper, Assistant Director of Water and Waste. Here tonight to again bring before you the Distal and Tall Land Exchange for your consideration. There's been a lot of things that have happened over the last few months. I think we met in February last, and so I want to bring that information to you. It was in your packet as well, but we'll just be discussing some of that stuff. But I also want to thank you for setting up a special time to meet, and thank you for your consideration tonight. So, getting into our presentation. Oops. That's not the first one. This is our first slide. Oh, okay. Maybe we'll try and get out of it.
That one's going to be done by the
Well, as you can see, I'm not all that technically savvy, so bear with me. And I have to apologize up front. It took me almost 30 minutes to get through this before, so I'll try and cut my time down a little bit. But tonight I just wanted to remind you that there's been some history with this property. Even before our first point up there, when Sandstone Ranch was purchased by the city, mostly the general fund, because open space fund didn't exist at the time, that these two properties, Distal and Toll, were part of that agreement, and there was an option for the city to buy them. That option ran out at the end of 2019. And the city moved forward with that option and purchased them, I believe, the 30th of December 2019, right before it expired. So, and at that point in time, Open Space didn't have the funds to purchase both properties in entirety. So there were discussions about future needs for the utilities and public works funds to do something in the future. There was nothing specified at the time. But if you recall, a portion of the Toll property was purchased with utilities and public works. There was a portion of that Toll property that was also bought with open space, and the Distal was bought completely with open space funds. That brings us up to 2024. There was a question about council directing staff to move forward with composting. April 9th of 2024, council had discussions regarding compost. There is a need within our city for composting. We have a goal to divert, modify our diversion rates. There's 2 levels there. One is coming up in 2027, I think. And then 2035 is the ultimate goal to get 95% of our waste stream diverted from the landfill. And a large portion of that is composting. Right now, the city provides curbside composting, which is at about 25% of the city's participation. There's a need and a goal to move that forward. And one option is for the city to try and collaborate with the county to bring a regional facility. That takes us to January of 2014. We had this presentation before council to look at land exchange, and they directed us to bring that to Brad for referral. We met in February to look at that. The board at that time tabled it for more information, which we're here for tonight. And then also, city manager Doug Dominguez made a presentation to council on June 3rd, which was an overall look at distal toll and what we call Urban Thomas for presenting to the council all of the different options and opportunities that we have where all these properties are tied together. And we'll look at that a little closer tonight. Wanted to bring up the municipal code that gives you guys direction on what you need to do as a board. And tonight we're looking at disposition or disposal of open space, and there are other sections of 1452 that talk about sale or purchase of other properties. What we're looking at tonight is an exchange between funds, and so it's a little small to read up there. But disposal of open space should be for a public purpose. So we hope to explain that tonight. And the disposal should be sensitive to the integrity of the property features, including sensitive habitat and cultural and historical features, and generally should not adversely affect the remainder of the property. So we're talking about that as well. And then there's just some times and other things that fill out the rest of that portion of this. So tonight, the proposed land exchange that we're discussing, what it is a change in city funds that hold ownership of certain properties. What it is not an approval of any future city uses on distal or toll or any other properties. Any use of these properties is at the discretion of city council, and also of whatever authority or jurisdiction those properties are in. So this will until they're both unincorporated in Weld County, so anything that happens out there will have to go through the Weld County process as well. So just wanted to put that out there. And if you had seen Harold's presentation June 3rd, this is directly out of his presentation, and I have a few other slides from his presentation as well. But we wanted to emphasize the sustainability and our environment. These are all goals that the city has. And as I talked about, composting is an issue for the city that we want to try to address. The distal and toll properties have an opportunity to increase our water storage. We talked about this last time a little bit, that in the open space portfolio, there are some properties that were purchased without irrigation water, and they have been retained and leased as agricultural properties and are in need of water. So this water storage could be instrumental in getting water to those properties. We're also looking for high quality wetlands, and this comes in the form of Boulder Creek as well as the other properties that Harold discussed around Urban Thomas. And we'll look at those too. And then also stormwater flood control and water treatment plant effluent is one thing that Harold talked about too that we can look at. Other goals include community and development. There are opportunities on other properties for housing. There's the sugar mill area that is redeveloping. We also have commercial and economic development areas and regional partnerships, as well as Wholesome, the lease holder on the Distal and Toll property, are the major supplier of gravel and asphalt in our area. Just to end up this conversation also on this slide, looking at land and open space, we want to preserve and restore open space and create trail connections and opportunities for the So as Harold said, meeting multiple goals takes coordination, careful balancing. This is his, what I call the multiple balls in the air and trying to keep them going where they need to be going to meet all of our goals. This is an overall map showing Distal and Toll, as well as the Irwin and the surrounding sugar factory area. And these are all tied together at this point in time by Wholesome being the lease holder at Distal and Toll, as well as doing mining at Irwin Thomas near the Costco site. And the way that the city negotiates the extension of their lease has impacts on how those properties on the west side of town, west side of the slide, west of County Road 1, how they develop and how we get the best development to meet the needs of the city. Let's see. Next. Looking specifically at the Distal and Toll opportunities, we've talked a lot about sustainability of the environment and the land and open space. We have, as has been mentioned, have an opportunity to partner with the county to do a composting facility. We have opportunities to increase water storage and preserve and reclaim open space and expand the community buffers, as well as creating trail connections. So the Distal and Toll areas are surrounded by existing city properties. Some interest is held in conservation easements, not in deed of trust for the properties. But we also do own several of those properties that are surrounding. As you can see, there's some funds, or sanitation funds on old landfill area off of Old County Road 5 and south of Highway 19. And then we have conservation easements. And then on the far west side of this slide, we're looking at general funds in the Sandstone Ranch that we talked about earlier. One thing I wanted to point out too is that as Distal and Toll are on the very edge of what's owned by the city, there are areas around that we have no control over. Frederick's comprehensive plan extends into this area, so there's a possibility for development. Weld County could approve other developments in this area as well, so we're still meeting our need and desire to maintain that buffer in this area. Talked about the water storage already, and then Toll is adjacent to Wolf Creek, where we can improve that repairing area as we move forward. To go back through time, the upper left corner depicts the existing conditions out there, showing that Distal was owned completely by the Open Space Fund. That Toll has about 33 acres along Boulder Creek with open space owned, as well as the 40 acres to the north, and then utilities and public works owns the remainder of the property. In January, staff presented the depiction that's up on the upper right. We're calling Scenario 1. That was our first stab at looking at exchanging properties. But then, as we came to Crab in February, we made some modifications to improve the effects on open space, making open space contiguous and then looking at trying to rehabilitate the open space area on the north side of Toll sooner than later. But with public input and with other considerations, we have put together scenario 3, and which we'll be looking at tonight. So again, existing on the right there, and today the Open Space Fund owns approximately 190 acres, both distal and toll together, and the Utilities and Public Works owns approximately 141 acres. Our proposed scenario 3 that we're looking at tonight, we're proposing that 50 acres of the north side of toll remain in open space, that about 65 acres be exchanged to Utilities and Public Works on the distal side, and then on the toll side, we've got over 104 acres of open space plus a 40 to the north, and the remaining 71 acres would remain in Utility and Public Works. So total open space is 195 compared to 190 today, and utilities would be about 136 acres. So some of the benefits of what we're looking at tonight, obviously was the increase of a couple acres for open space, widening the open space area adjacent to Boulder Creek, and making that contiguous with the north 40 acres to provide for possible future trails and to improve the efficiency of maintaining that area. There are 50 acres on the distal side, on the north side, that are closest to the St. Vrain Creek, and that area we are working with Wholesome on our lease negotiations to possibly try and get that restoration started sooner than the end of the lease, and hopefully within the next few years. The 65 acres remaining on the distal site. Some of that area is needed by Wholesome to finish out their lease, continue to do their gravel operations, so they have an asphalt batch plant on that site. And we'd be looking at utilizing the southern piece for Public Works and Utilities, and possible composting. And this also shows possible setbacks around that 65 acres to improve the ability to use that property. So open space, yep, reclamation, extension of the Wholesome lease, keep that area as we talked about, and connecting open space properties across the toll site, and then also opportunity for water storage. Expand the area next to Boulder Creek for open space. As I indicated before, the city is negotiating with Wholesome. We want to expedite the northern portion of the property's reclamation if possible, and create that buffer between the continued operation and the St. Vrain Creek. We'd like also in our negotiations for Wholesome to release the southern portion, 8 to 10 acres of the site for other uses such as composting. And if composting were to move forward, it would be under the state and county oversight. There would be environmental testing involved with any of the permitting or any of the site plan or special use review through the county. And then we also take into account the neighboring wildlife considerations, so we'd have to do, in addition to phase 2 environmental assessment, we also have to do wildlife studies and mitigate those impacts that we may have. And then we'd also be looking at what that buffer area around the other properties, what that would look like. It could include trees, berms, or fencing, or other types of treatments. So just a step back, there's been several comments based upon the phase one environmental assessment that was done at the time of purchase of Toll and Distal. The Toll and Distal sites had been under mining for a long time prior to that. I think the initial permit was issued in 1995, but it progressed slowly over time. So in any environmental assessment, the company that does it looks for what they call recognized environmental conditions, or RECs. And RECs do not necessarily mean that there has been contamination or leaks, but there is a potential for that. It could also include visual estimations of spills. They can see something on the ground, they would identify it. And phase one is usually done to estimate the risk to the buyer of the property and how much they may think that they have to remediate in order to clean up the entire site. And as in all phase ones, the company recommends that you do a phase two to clarify what they're seeing on the site, provide more information, and whether the city develops this site or prior to the closing of the mining permit, there will be a phase two done here. We did want to point out too that the main RECs that were identified in that report included a spill from oil and gas facilities that are on the far right side of this depiction here. That first star on the right, that was during oil and gas operations. They had a spill. They remediated that and met all of the state requirements to close out and abandon the wells that are there. Another one that was identified in the middle of the property was a maintenance area that is an asphalt area that has curbing around it, and there were spills within that area as they're maintaining vehicles, but it was all contained within the paved area. They also identified diesel storage tanks, or above ground tanks that had inadequate secondary containment, which means that an above ground tank is set inside of a larger bathtub, for lack of a better term, so that if there is a spill or a break of that tank, that it goes into that containment and doesn't go anywhere else. There's, at the time of 2019, secondary containment was smaller than the volume that they were holding in those tanks. It's our understanding with conversations with Wholesome that they remediated their secondary containment on their above ground storage tanks. And that the other, the maintenance area will be remediated when they restore or leave the site. I also wanted to point out that the environmental assessment was provided in 2019 prior to council approving the purchase. That was included in all of the information provided to council at the time. It was decided that this was an acceptable risk and the purchase went forward. I will go through the wildlife habitat here, but Jim Crick is obviously more of an expert than I am in this area, so he can add more to it if you want at this time, or you can answer questions as we move forward. But really, I just wanted to point out that the city is concerned about the ecological value that is in this area, and we understand that it is eagle roosting areas, and we want to be sensitive to what is out there. This depiction that's up there now on the right shows that the roosting area that was identified along the St. Marie, that we are within, some of the toll property is within a half mile of that area. The distal property is outside of the half mile boundary that's recommended. And then all of our operations that we propose would be beyond the half mile. And Obviously, with any development that happens out there, like I said before, we'll do the wildlife studies, and if we need to mitigate, that will be part of the ongoing operation for mitigation. So, looking at the toll site, its current condition is shown on the right of the aerial photos. You can see that it was mined in multiple cells, and Wholesome has done a few different things over time. They've mined the majority of the site. There is one cell still on the very north side, just to the west or left of the top right corner there. There's an area that's not been mined yet. So they're telling us that once they know the direction that we're going, that it'll take them 2 to 3 months to mine that area out. And then they would start the restoration of this property. Some of those cells, the whole site is over 200 acres. Some of those cells range from 10 feet deep to 20 feet deep. And Wholesome has been importing and exporting material out of there as they need. So what they're waiting for is for the city to work with them on a modification to the reclamation plan. The current reclamation plan shows that the entire property would be water storage in 2 ponds. And looking at the conditional decree that the city acquired with these properties, it would be difficult to maintain and to operate water storage of over 212 acres. So that's why we've been showing in the other depictions water just on the eastern half of the property. We think that's more feasible and equitable to the property. Plus we have opportunities for upland prairie as well as the riparian corridor for the open space. One of the things that we indicated before was that on the proposed utility area that would remain with the utilities, that there's a need for an area disposal of clean fill. And our operations groups do water main breaks, and they have to excavate around them, they have excess material. Same for road repairs and other operational undertakings that we take. So we have excess fill material. It's clean. We need a place to dispose of that. We definitely do not want to send it to the landfills. So one proposal is to fill in the remaining area that is not going to be water or as part of the open space. So what we want to talk about a little bit is how does that progress and what does that look like over time. In this depiction, the gray boundary around is the area we propose for bonds. And we think that in the near term, as we work with Wholesome and figure out the final reclamation plan and get them underway with reclamation, we would be able to do the riparian area first, followed by the upland prairie, and then we'd be working on the ponds. And we think that near term is somewhere in 5 to 10 years. As we look at midterm, which is beyond that, and potentially up to 20 to 25 years, we think that water storage could be constructed and in use as our operations groups are starting to fill that area that was left between the open space and the ponds. And we would start on the very north end, fill that to a point in our long term where we could start reclaiming that as upland prairie that would be the same or similar to the open space adjacent to it. And as we move along and fill that in, as we get further to the south, we would reclaim the entire area as upland prairie as the adjacent open space is. And at that point in time, we looked to do an agreement with open space to manage that whole area. Because of requirements of the utilities and other funds, we would not be able to turn over or grant that property to open space, but it would basically look the same as open space, be maintained as the same as the rest of the open space. So, like we said at the beginning, the municipal code requires that we show that there's some net benefit to open space in order to do this exchange. And the things that we've looked at is creating new water storage, which also helps with other properties owned by open space. We can preserve and reclaim the open space and hopefully in a faster time than some areas, a faster time frame than others. Creating more connected open space that would provide for connection, trails possibly to other communities. And we want to maintain our community buffer as well. It was one of the mainstays of open space. While granting the open space on additional acreage and initiate earlier reclamation, as we talked about, and work on distal, as well as the 10-year time frame and progression we looked at on tall, and then increasing buffer along the creek to protect that riparian area. The other thing that was talked about on June 3rd with the City Council was the potential purchase of what's called Bigelow property. It's about 15 acres that is just to the west of Disco. That is a small hole in the open space if you look at the overall map. The owners of that property sold the majority of their property to the city for Sandstone Ranch, and they maintained that last 15 acres. It's not written, there's no confirmation, but we believe that they have the intent of holding on that property at some point in time. But the city was approached by the property owners, and the City Council has approved the city to pursue the purchase of that property. If you listened or saw the City Council meeting, the Bigelow property will most likely be purchased with 50% of open space funds and 50% of sanitation, or I'm sorry, 50% general fund and 50% sanitation funds. That gives the city the opportunity to do other things out there to continue to buffer the 65 acres under the fiscal, or it also gives opportunity for other things out there. But in the end, no matter what happens on the Bigelow property, that'll be the decision of the council. Okay, so next steps. This is a little premature for you guys is deliberation tonight to ask us questions. But council did request that we bring the board's recommendations back on July 22nd. So we're hoping to get a recommendation from you tonight. And then all of the future land uses for Distal Home and Bigelow properties will go through the process and first determined by City Council, and we'll have to go through all the other processes in order to make that happen. So that's the end of the presentation. Thank you for staying late. We'll be happy to answer any questions you have. Oh, but I mentioned that I have with me Jim Crick and Danielle. That those two questions we also have Jamesy from the City Attorney's Office with us tonight.
We're going to start with questions from the board, and then we'll let the public be heard. Well, instead of going around, just let them raise their hand if they have any questions, comments.
guess I have one, just to kick it off with questions. So there was some concern with water storage along the creekways post-flood. Can you explain why the water storage is still a proposal? Why it's the blood water storage is a concern?
So, yeah, in 2013, you'll recall along the St. Vrain, really starting with Pella Ponds was the first failure, which caused water to be directed to the northern side of the city of Longmont, which is not in the floodplain. So that was a concern. My understanding is that it was the manner in which the ponds were first constructed that didn't have any spillways or overflow capabilities. So that was one thing that led to breach of those ponds. Let's see, as it came through the city, there were other ponds that were also breached. We think that there was a responsible and reasonable way to construct these ponds so that we have overflow control from breaching.
Yeah, I think, we don't have a map to show you tonight, but the floodway in the entire Boulder Creek corridor area is actually really large. That spills over from Boulder Creek. I think it gets close to County Road 7 on each side. So it's not like water, if it got into, flood water got into these ponds, it's not like the ponds could possibly direct that water somewhere where it's going.
Okay. But there's no city ordinance or like regulation that prohibits it now. It's just a best practice.
Simple question. There's a net gain to the amount of open space acreage. There's statements in kind of staff's recommendations, which have opinion that the land in tow is more readily available for, or not maybe available, but easy to reclaim or has more opportunity given some of the lesser industrial things that have happened over there versus distal. Is there a kind of good ecological reason why one is easier to reclaim than the other?
Yeah, if you think about an industrial site that's been industrial for decades with very heavy machinery, one of the biggest detriments to being able to do reclamation and restoration is soil compaction. All of our restoration starts with soil, and so that soil has been so disturbed over literally decades of industrial use. It will be pretty tricky for Holston to do that reclamation work. So that's where we see that we'll have better opportunity and probably better results on toll compared to distal.
I think that Harold brought up the point too, that distal is an industrial site now, and if you're out there, it would seem to make sense that if we have industrial uses, we want to continue those on that site, rather than restore that site and create another industrial use adjacent.
Any questions from the board?
Yeah, I have two. Well, could you talk a little bit about the Holston lease on Distal and kind of the timing as that is right now? I know you're maybe negotiating that. What that means for kind of the future development of that site or changes to that.
Sure.
You laid out a couple options, but the timing of that wasn't clear to me. I know it's kind of a lengthy lease.
Sure. So the current lease, there's two parts to it. The first part is the mining of the Irwin Thomas site. Their ability to take that Irwin Thomas material and bring it to the distal site ends December 31st of this year. And they're not going to be complete with their mining operations on Irwin Thomas at the end of this year. They think potentially another year or two. They're going to negotiate for that. But the ultimate lease ends in 2033. So we can continue to do their gravity processing and heat asphalt that on that site in 2033. Correct. So those are the items that we're trying to negotiate with folks now. we would extend those timeframes for them in exchange for things that we talked about, restoration of that 50 acres. Possibility of moving forward past that whole.
Okay. Other follow-up was what you laid out in scenario 3 and the eastern part of Tull with the retained, I think, 70 or so acres for public works. In the scenario you outlined that the majority of that seemed to be for water storage. So what's the decision tree of how much you retain for public works only to then use it for water storage, or we're able to move 3% of the property over to open space in terms of total acres, but why not move that whole eastern area to open space ownership? Should something be used for water in the future?
So my understanding, my take on it is that we talked about the exchange and funds from the enterprise funds to the open space fund, that we have to make that as equitable as possible so that one fund does not lose out over the other fund. So that's the retention of 71 acres allows us to make that assertion that the utility funds are still full at the end, even when it's underwater. But the utilities can also utilize water storage for other things. We have downstream obligations that we need to store water and release at different periods during the year. The state has a little more opportunity to do that.
I think the difference between the funds is one of the most opaque parts of this, and the board and the public as well, is understanding the distinctions between different funds. We all look at properties and see it's owned by the city of Longmont, if we think of it as being the city of Longmont. So I think understanding how much of that is elective choice, or for example, if there was funds available for open space to purchase that land, that would look very different from this. That's just understanding how that decision tree goes forward is helpful, I think, and maybe can be discussed further. That's what that is.
Any other questions?
I have a couple. So it looks like we bought, the city of Longmont bought the distal property in 2018, is that right?
Yes.
Why did they buy it using open space when they knew it was industrial use for decades? Why did they not buy it with utility funding instead?
That's a good question, and I think if we had it to do over again, we probably would look at that more closely. My understanding is that at the time, they saw the distal property being adjacent to other existing open space that we had, which seemed to make sense at the time. We would keep open space contiguous, but not taking into account the current uses or potential uses in the future.
I think that still stands true, that it would make more sense to create open space, especially with it earmarked that way in the budget. Can you tell me a little bit about the toll property and how many residents are around it? Because that's a big thing too. I think a lot of people in this room live around the distal property. And so we might be talking about equal acreage, right? But we are talking about really different land plots, I'm thinking. So can you tell me about how many homes are around the toll property?
Yes, so it depends on how far you want to go out, but there are 6 homes along Boulder Creek adjacent to the toll property. There are homes to the north on what's called, we should look at the map.
I'm visual, so that helps me too.
What's that? Temperature control, temperature processing. It's to the north. Let's see if we get a map. As you can kind of see in this, there are homes all along Boulder Creek on the west side. There are homes to the south as well. And then, this is temperature processing up here. There's another home up here. We have a big enough map to show Lighthouse Cove is another subdivision in the county that's further to the northeast as well.
And then what about around the distal property?
So the distal property, I don't know if you can see it or not, but there is a home that sits right at the very, very corner, right adjacent to the plug and abandoned oil wells. And then there is a home directly to the south here as well. And then the next homes are further down to the west on 20.5.
That's,
Then right across the street there though too, on 20.5, or just to the south, right on the road.
Thank you, that's.
any questions on this? Okay, all right, I'm gonna move on to, public hearing for, items on the agenda. I have to take the public hearing off the table, that we continue back in February. Everyone who signed in, Veronica, I believe will call, folks in the order they've signed in. We're gonna ask you to keep it to 3 minutes, because there's so many of us.
Where would one sign in here? It's not very apparent.
Just, yes, if anyone didn't sign in, please see Veronica in the back there. It's 3 minutes a person, and Hank, one of the staff, gentlemen, Jeff, is going to keep time so that I can listen fully to what you're saying. And then he's gonna, somebody will do a little,
I'll raise my hand at.
raise your hand, 30 seconds. So 3 minutes, at 30 seconds left to go, Jeff's gonna raise his hand, and then I will jump in if necessary to keep everyone on time so we can get through everybody.
Okay.
All right.
We'll start with Rutgers.
Here.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Rutger Myers, and I'm the Director of Compost and Carbon Farming for EcoCycle. EcoCycle is a long-standing nonprofit that works across Boulder County and beyond that's helped build zero-waste communities for the past 50 years. We will leave the issues of this land swap to the City of Longmont and its local residents, who are steeped in the details and the particulars of these parcels. But we want to say our enthusiastic support for the City of Longmont considering a site that could be used for municipal compost. EcoCycle thinks it's important that we have more programs and facilities of all scales to divert organics towards beneficial uses such as compost. We support and work hard to facilitate composting from backyards to community scale to on-farm programs, all the way up to the community scale Class 3 facilities. Composting is something proactive that we can do in our fight against climate change. When we compost, we build soil that has a resilient structure that can withstand natural disasters, can absorb and retain more water, and can take carbon from the atmosphere and put it back into the earth where it belongs. Once the right site or sites are selected, EcoCycle stands ready to work with Longmont and Boulder County in getting a facility up and running and educating the public on how to compost and the importance of a clean organic stream. So together we can produce high-quality compost and build tolerable soils. Thank you so much for your service and your time and your consideration of this issue.
Sorry, your address as well?
Yeah.
Oh,
I think that was part of, I think that's part of
yes.
it.
So sorry, could you please set your address when you, before you speak? It's in your name as well. Sorry, thank you.
Okay, Jeff Lester.
Good evening, Prattman, members of CRAB. My name is Jeff Lester, 1517 Mayfield Lane in Longmont. I'm a Longmont resident speaking today in strong opposition to the proposed land swap between the Distal and Tull properties. At its core, this land exchange contradicts the spirit and purpose of our city's open space program. The Distal property currently protected under that program was purchased with taxpayer support and public trust, with the understanding that it would remain preserved and undeveloped. Repurposing this land for industrial uses such as composting facilities or firefighting training center undermines that trust. There are three key reasons I and other community members oppose this swap. First, environmental impact. The Distal property lies near a sensitive habitat home to winter roosting bald eagles at the confluence of the Boulder and St. Vrain creeks. The composting facility would introduce persistent noise, artificial light, traffic, and a massive increase in human activity, all of which have been shown to disturb eagle behavior and nesting. The second reason opposing this swap was public health and safety. The city's own Phase 1 environment site assessment recommended further investigation into potential toxic contamination on the distal site. Until a Phase 2 study is completed, it is reckless to consider using that land for any composting or other operations that could involve exposure to environmental hazards. The third reason opposing this swap was the issue of public trust. Longmont voters have repeatedly approved and extended open space taxes, most recently in 2024, when over 70% voted to extend the program indefinitely. They did so with the understanding that these lands would be preserved, not reassigned for industrial use. Swapping open space land for operational use, even within the city's own departments, sets a dangerous precedent. I urge you as board members to recommend against the proposed land swap and to insist that all necessary environmental assessments be completed. No further consideration should proceed until the Boulder County compost feasibility study is released and fully understood. Let us protect both our wildlife and the shared vision for Longmont's open space legacy. Thank you for your time and commitment to the thoughtful stewardship of our community's natural resources.
Ruby Bowman?
Hi, my name is Ruby Bowman, 1512 Left Hand Drive in Longmont. I read the city's response regarding the land exchange proposal, and there's a glaring omission in the report in the bald eagle section. The city failed to address potential eagle foraging behavioral changes induced by placement of the composting facility so close to eagle habitat at Distal. The city knows this is a major concern. Dana Bovey of Front Range Nesting Bald Eagle Studies brought it to the attention of Natural Resources at a meeting with staff. I have also mentioned it in my verbal and written comments to this board and city council. What does one have to do to get the city to acknowledge that this is a serious matter and needs to be studied before Distal is considered as a composting site? Another concern I have is the city's failure to acknowledge the dire situation of the winter bald eagle communal roost at the confluence, which is on Longmont open space property. Again, this topic was brought up with Natural Resources, and this graph was shown to them. The graph clearly shows this 20-year downward trend in the number of eagles at the confluence roost. The proposed 65-acre development site at Distal, which will include the composting facility, an office building, a CDL driving course, a 20,000 square foot warehouse, and much more, will bring more light and noise pollution and human-related disturbances to Weld County. These impacts on eagles need to be studied before disposing Distal in order for it to become a satellite city complex. Also, when the nesting area buffers map was presented to City Council at the June 3rd meeting, Councilmember Chris directed Natural Resources staff to get an external source to verify what she was saying about the eagle space in the map. I don't see that has been done. The city downplays the potential adverse impacts of the Distal development projects on bald eagles in the report. They write eagles have established roost sites and nests have successfully fledged. They fail to mention the abandonment of the middle roost on Boulder Creek, which was due to development impacts and the teetering existence of the confluence roost. It's up to you as board members to look at the science and ensure no harm comes to our bald eagles. Don't allow the confluence roost to become collateral damage to composting and city development projects. Reject the land exchange. Thank you.
Go ahead, Pedro.
Gordon Pedro, 2639 Falcon Drive, Longmont. Having served as city manager in Longmont from 1993 until 2012, I know the value our residents place on open space. I'm here tonight to encourage PRAD members to take a courageous stand and protect the city's open space program for future generations. PRAB is the only board or commission that is designated in the code, section 14.52, open space disposition, required to conduct a public hearing and advise the city council prior to the council taking final action to dispose of open space. That makes PRAB the eyes and ears of the citizens of Longmont who tax themselves to buy open space. The city council, through the city manager and public works staff, is asking you to approve a land exchange so that they can convert open space into intense industrial development. If Boulder County were not dangling big dollars to entice Longmont into a partnership so that the county can shift its composting dilemma to Weld County, this land exchange proposal would not likely be before you. Since Boulder County has not completed its comprehensive feasibility study regarding composting, this proposed land exchange is premature. Why the big rush to get PRAD's blessing for this land exchange scheme when critical data about composting is not available? I think the rush is because this is not primarily about composting, but about grabbing open space land for industrial purposes. We all support composting, but not on land purchased for open space. There's 1,000 acres of land in Boulder County that could be a compost facility. Boulder County owns thousands of acres of open space. Why not compost on its open space? I'm asking PRAD to do the right thing tonight and either, one, table this item until Boulder County completes its comprehensive analysis of composting, or two, advise the city council to disapprove this land exchange. I prefer option two. PRAD should not be expected to give advice to the city council without complete information. This proposal to convert open space land is precedent-setting slippery slope, which does not fit the wishes of the Longmont residents who reaffirmed their support for open space by 74% in last November's election.
30 seconds.
Just because the city council has the authority to dispose of open space, if they make a determination that it's equal or better than equal for open space versus other land, it doesn't mean you need to be complicit with this process that is much flawed. Thank you.
Dwight Casper.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dwight Casperbauer, and I'm a resident and board member at Lighthouse Cove. I live at 9841 Shoreline Drive. I'm joined by my fellow board members, Erica Lausberg and Mike Castle. Lighthouse Cove is an 18-home residential community immediately east of the Tull property. Our homes are located around an unlined gravel pit, and as an unlined gravel pit, our lake is dependent upon the water table in the area. We use our lake for recreational purposes. We look favorably upon the proposed land swap, as it would put the city of Longmont in a position to follow through on the original reclamation plan for the Tull property, a creation of 2 retention ponds and open space. Our HOA and homeowners have an interest in this planning process, as our property is named specifically in the Tull mining and reclamation plan that was approved by the state of Colorado in 1994. The permit number is 1994027. This reclamation and mining plan indicates that the mining company would mitigate water loss to Lighthouse Cove Lake, which at the time was referred to as the Broom property. As further background, the original owner, Cooley Mining, was succeeded by Aggregate Industries, which was succeeded by Holcim. The mining of the Tull property over the years has gradually moved from west to east, as you've seen on the graphic. In recent years, the dewatering trenches that are a part of this mining process have paralleled our property approximately 75 feet west of our property. The hydrology data from the 3 monitoring wells located on the boundary indicates that this dewatering operation has dropped the water table in the area more than 10 feet from its prior pre-mining state. In the spring of 2023, our lake was at a low point, approximately 1.5 feet down from its historic level. We know this because we're compelled to monitor our water use, and we use digital recording data. The low point on our index was 9.31 feet. The normal level of the pond is at 10.85 feet. In 2023, 2024, and 2025, Olson Mining helped us restore and maintain our lake level by recharging using Wholesome Smith Emmons ditchwater rights, which was approved by the state of Colorado pursuant to Wholesome's annual combined substitute water supply plan. At this stage, it is uncertain if this drop in the water table is transient or permanent. It is also unclear what may happen to the water table and the flow of water into Lighthouse Cove Lake with the installation of lined water storage ponds immediately west of our property. And I point out immediately is within 75 to 100 feet. In closing, we support the toll property open space reclamation portion of the land swap as long as the reclamation of the property is consistent with the reclamation plan commitment to mitigate the effects on Lighthouse Cove Lake water levels. We also request your consideration in continuing to recharge using the Smith Emmons ditchwater for our lake as needed to mitigate the dewatering impacts and the maintenance of lake levels. We appreciate the city's cooperation and look forward to monitoring the reclamation and water management plan as it proceeds. Thank you.
Roger Lance.
Good evening. My name is Roger Lang. I live at 800 Briarwood Lane in Longmont. I've been on the Longmont City Council for 8 years previously, and I was the mayor of Longmont for 2 years also. Open space is of high value to the citizens of Longmont, as demonstrated by the passage of ballot issue 3A. Last year, it extends indefinitely the open space tax paid by Longmont citizens. That demonstrates the importance of open space to Longmont residents. When open space has been acquired in the past, location is of primary consideration. To that point, once a location has been established, it's meant to be permanent and not a future candidate for relocation. My opinion is that any consideration of moving or exchanging existing open space property is not what the voters of Longmont want. Longmont voters share a belief that existing open space should be left alone and not be a candidate for any future property exchange. I'm one of those voters. Thank you for listening.
Jamie Seymour.
Jamie Simo, 517 Independence Drive. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I'm very concerned about the proposed distal toll land swap that is on your agenda. You are tasked with recommending to the City Council whether the swap should go forward. However, there are many questions that have yet to be answered. Chapter 14.52 of the Longmont Municipal Code deals with the disposition of open space property. The code states that the sale or exchange of open space should only be for public purposes, including but not limited to use of the property for right-of-way and easements for city roads, utilities, and life essential infrastructure, and that it should result in a net benefit to the open space program. The disposal of open space is a big deal. It should not and cannot be done lightly, as open space is purchased largely through taxpayer dollars. Just last year, Longmont voters voted overwhelmingly to extend in perpetuity the open space sales tax, which is 2 cents of every $10 spent. Presumably, the purchase of the distal property is made pursuant to the requirements set forth in section 4.04.130, paragraph I, which outlines the criteria for designating open space. Therefore, its disposal should be done only under the strictest of criteria in accordance with the municipal code, taking into account Longmont residents' trust in and financial input into our open space program. This land swap proposal was brought forward because of the possibility that Boulder County could build a compost facility on Distal. However, Boulder County is looking at a number of properties, and there isn't any guarantee that they will choose Distal. The county's compost feasibility study hasn't even been completed to determine whether a compost facility in Boulder County is even doable or financially viable. The study won't be released until later this year. So what is the rush for this land swap? Longmont owns both the distal and toll properties, so theoretically the swap, if it is to occur, can happen at any time. In addition, if Boulder County decides not to build the compost facility on distal, what will Longmont build there instead? And will whatever is built there truly adhere to the adage of being life-essential infrastructure for public purposes? How can PRAB determine whether the land swap adheres to the criteria of our municipal code if they don't know exactly what will be built on the property? While I am impressed with the vision for the toll property, with the speed with which this proposal is going forward, I can only cynically conclude that this is a land grab, which will allow for building on the valuable land currently occupied by the Fire Training Center on Market Street, which was bandied about as potentially being moved to distal. Especially after seeing the staff presentation this evening where the sugar mill property was mentioned after it was never previously mentioned in relation to distal and toll. Going forward with this land swap as is bad precedent to set for our open spaces. And I strongly urge you to recommend to City Council that this land swap not occur until the compost feasibility study is complete and analyzed. And if distal isn't chosen as the site of the compost facility, what would be constructed on distal is reviewed. Thank you.
Good evening, Sherman Way, 1632 Sherman Way, Longmont. Thank you for taking this matter very seriously, which feels like respect for land, habitat, wildlife, people, and the integrity of our open space program. This issue is so complex with limited time to speak, so I've made hard copies for you of my concerns about the inaccurate and incomplete information in your packet. You have not been provided essential information to make a responsible decision this evening or in the near future regarding the significant and impactful land exchange. It is crucial to consider the county's extensive and expensive compost facility study, which has now been postponed until later in 2025. It is also vital you have all your questions fully and accurately answered, which hasn't yet happened. Consequently, LAB is left with two prudent options. One, to reject the proposal as it stands. Or two, to propose that this be postponed until A, the county feasibility study has been finalized, and B, your questions are answered thoroughly. Should you disagree and move forward tonight, please include two essential guardrails. One, make the entire proposal null and void should Boulder County not be involved. Two, include Longmont former Open Space Director Dan Wolford's 11 safeguards that Harold Dominguez characterized as doable at our February 3rd meeting with him. City Council erred at their June 3rd meeting. It was disrespectful to expect PRAB to make such an important decision without vital information. They rubber stamped this and are hoping you will too. 9 Longmont residents spoke at the council meeting, bringing up many and various concerns. Several of us asked council to pump the brakes and wait for the feasibility study release before sending this your way. The key question is, why is the city moving forward on this when the compost study has not been completed? Last year, the county hired a consultant to study the future of compost for Boulder County. So far, this consultant has been paid $139,500 taxpayer dollars. At the February 5th county meeting, the consultants laid out the study's framework. Where are we now? Where are we going? How might we get there? That night, the consultant laid out where we are now. Phase 2, due by the end of this year, will have the real meat. Where are we going, and how are we going to get there? This phase includes possible locations, distal being one of them. To move this proposal forward tonight without phase 2, vital information is impossible. Longmont owns 3,200 acres of open space. Contrast this with the city of Boulder, which has 46,000 acres. Boulder County owns 104,000 acres. Neither of them would dare entertain the notion of using their open space lands for industrial use. Why Longmont? It just doesn't pass the smell test. It all boils down to trust, which sadly is an abysmal short supply in the public's perception concerning all things government these days. Changing open space designation, even for a seemingly good cause, is a betrayal of public trust and sets a very dangerous precedent. Just say no to this half-baked, rushed, and thus very suspect proposal. Thank you.
Ron Stewart?
My name's Ron Stewart. I live at 203 Western Sky Circle, and I'm here tonight to oppose the proposed disposition of the open space. In the 25 years of the Longmont Open Space Program, Land that you've purchased as open space has never been converted to development purposes. And I don't believe you should head down that slippery slope with this proposal. You're setting precedent, and it's a bad precedent. And it doesn't bode well for the protection of open land over the long term. I think it's important to remember that Longmont open space has never been purchased with general fund money. It's been purchased with tax funds provided by the voters who on three separate occasions voted to increase their tax load to preserve open land. I don't believe voters approved taxes to buy land that would be used later for development purposes, even if some of those purposes have a benefit, are beneficial. I support composting, for instance. They voted to buy land that would remain open and undeveloped, and to protect the broad expanse of the St. Vrain River corridor. I'm certain that most felt, as I feel, that open space is all the more important as we experience more and more development and congestion along the Front Range and in Longmont. And the disposition you have before you isn't a minor matter. It's 65 acres of open space where you'll be creating a large industrial site in the middle of hundreds of acres of open space and farmland and river corridor. It's a great deal for public works and water interests and composting and fire training and limb diversion and who knows what else. But it's not a good deal for open space. I also am really concerned that there really aren't any constraints about what this could be used for in the future. There's no guarantee about what it might be in the future. It's open-ended. So, I don't believe, and if there were issues about whether the land couldn't be reclaimed and all of that that's under the mining site, why did the city buy it in the first place? You know, I mean, the city decided it was appropriate as open space. Why did you buy it in the first place if you're not going to keep it as open space? I don't believe voters increased their taxes to buy open land that would one day be developed. And if the city didn't think it was appropriate as open space, it shouldn't have bought it in the first place. To me, this proposal violates the public trust. Thanks.
Nick, okay.
Pickett, 1730 Logan County Road 20 and a half. I'm not prepared like some of y'all, and I appreciate you guys talking tonight, but I'm here to just kind of give you the snapshot I have in the 26 years. Lived right on Boulder Creek right there, and we've watched the eagle for years and years, as they are right there, right off the 20 and a half too, going north on South Boulder Creek. Not just the picture you had earlier with the big roofs up there, they're all along on the way up there. It's beautiful. We have deer, turkey, fox, bobcats, mountain lions even come down through there. It's amazing. It's beautiful, and that's why we moved out there. When we first moved out there, they told us the gravel operations would be done in about 10 years, and they were just going to, cease to doing that. And we were excited about that too because of the traffic and again, the wildlife and everything else. But then we heard that it was bought or it was sold, and then we again were excited because we heard that you guys bought it, and because we know the history of what you've done with open space. So we thought, this is great. When gravel's done, they'll put the open space in there, it'll be green belt, it'll be beautiful again. So this really is disturbing now. We're going to have industry, not only, and again, we're all for recycling too, but not in my backyard. I don't want that smell coming across the road into my yard all the time. We sit out on our porch, and we have studies in the morning, Bible studies in the morning, and we have our family there in the afternoon. We use our patio and everything else out there. The road is crazy during the commute times. Because of the flood in 2013, everybody found a little shortcut between our spot, between Longmont and the Tri-City area. So there's a lot of traffic in the morning, but in the evening there's not. Our road's back, and so we enjoy our outside spot. And there's a lot of houses that we're not showing on the map there, but on the south side of 20 and a half, we'd be straight across from that area right there. So I'm really concerned about the amount of traffic and the industry coming right across the street from us now too. It's already hard to pull out of our driveways sometimes. The smell and pollution is a huge thing. And then the quality of life that we have won't be there anymore. We're gonna have industry straight across the road from us. And again, like I said, we've been up there for 26 years and enjoyed what we have. We've seen what you guys have done to the South St. Vrain. We enjoy those walking paths too, with all the wildlife there, and we're gonna really eliminate it now. We're gonna bring more traffic and industry into that area. So I'm opposed for it. Thank you.
Ashley Stoltzman?
Thank you, board members, for having me. I'm Ashley Stoltzman, a Boulder County Commissioner. I live at 228 South Jefferson Avenue over in Louisville. And I'm here primarily this evening just to offer to answer any questions people may have about the county's interest in a composting facility. We are working on a composting facility, and as several people mentioned, we're looking at feasibility study. It's not directly related to this project at all. We're really looking at what the cost of the facility would be, the different types of things we would need, technologies and things like that. And as we were studying it and looking at it, we did start talking with Longmont staff and have committed that if Longmont's interested in being a partner with us, we would be a partner with Longmont. So there's no doubt that we would be a good partner to our cities in the county, and that's not up for question. Just wanted to clear that up. On the issue of open space, I'm a huge open space advocate. Councilmember Lloyd can attest to that. We've worked together to preserve a bunch of open spaces together and fought really hard on the Kanemoto Estates conservation easement termination, which I oppose strongly. That predated the TBR program by decades, and that was a big loss in my opinion. So, my comments are just coming from the heart and a place of being a huge open space advocate. That I would say tonight's decision is actually not about composting or the utilities or public works project, but overall in the community, what you all hope to see in this area from open space. And when I looked at the first iteration, I thought it looked all right. I thought, staff have come up with something that looks all right. But when I look at the iterations that are informed by public input here for iteration 3, I see a significant improvement to the open space program. I see a much greater area in the riparian corridor protected. I see the area shifted away from the bald eagle nesting areas and away from the creek where we have a lot of eagle activity. I can understand why some neighbors significantly would object to swapping the utility from the east side to the west side, but other neighbors will significantly appreciate that. So when you look at the overall layout of homes in the area, there are a lot of homes to the east of this area that are currently adjacent to utilities that then would be adjacent to open space. So I see the trade-offs for the residents to be 50-50 depending which house you live in. I think it's going to be pretty hard to decide that. But overall, the water storage I don't think can be undervalued. Right now, when we're partnering with City of Longmont on agricultural open space, a big issue is whether we have water storage, whether we can irrigate the cropland, and so getting that space is really, really valuable, and that's really not possible on the distal side. So I would look at this primarily, if I were on your shoes tonight, what is this for open space? Does this benefit open space? And to me, it's an increase in open space, improved habitat. You are getting some additional connectivity, overall a big win. I think your question was very interesting about whether open space should have to pay the public works utility for this because it is so much on the open space side of the ledger. But that's, I think, a question for the utility staff to look at that enterprise, and they've said that it looks as if the enterprise is still full. So, but I think it was an interesting question.
Dana Bo?
Thank you. We have multiple podiums tonight. I'll take this one. Good evening. My name is Dana Bovee, and I'm the founder of Front Range Eagle Studies. And I'm speaking here tonight to urge this board to take seriously the impact of the proposed compost facility, that it may have on the confluence roost and the bald eagles that rely on it. This roost, just east of town where Boulder Creek and St. Vrain Creek come together, has been a vital winter refuge for bald eagles for decades, probably longer. But in recent years, we've documented a clear and troubling decline in eagle numbers there. Ruby showed the map. But our team has submitted detailed reports on this based on thousands of hours of field observation and long-term tracking. Some of it published in peer-reviewed journals. It's important to understand that this decline is part of the pattern. We're seeing major disruptions to eagle use all along Boulder Creek, largely tied to land use change and development. The Middle Roost upstream is now gone, lost to oil and gas activity, water extraction, and the expansion of ponds. The Confluence Roost is still active, but barely. If we keep pushing into these last remaining spaces, there's not much buffer that's going to be left. This brings me to this board's name, Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. It's a name that says a lot, implies that Longmont's highest priorities for public land are human use and access. But Longmont, as people have spoken tonight, also has a strong open space program, one that its residents have voted to fund and expand. There's nothing in this board's name that reflects that side of land stewardship. That's a problem, but also an opportunity. This is a chance to turn that perception around and send a message the city does, in fact, take habitat and wildlife protection seriously. It's not going to get better. The compost facility may serve a public good, but it's being proposed as a sensitive and shrinking landscape. The burden of proof must fall on the city, in the county, not on volunteers or the public, to show that this project won't further damage one of the last functioning roost sites in this corridor. If you haven't reviewed the reports we've submitted, I encourage you all to do so. This is a defining moment, and the decisions made here will help Longmont lead or join the long list of communities that let vital wildlife resources slip away. Thank you.
About addresses again, please.
1935 Tin Cup Court, Boulder, Colorado.
Thank you. Yvonne, Pickett.
Yvonne Pickett, 1730 Weld County Road, 20 and a half. We live right, would be about right here. And we have some other property out on the other side too. And both will be, either property is going to be impacted. I appreciate the concern for open space. I love that. Your concern about the residents. That's the first time that I've heard any concern for the impact on the residents. Pulling out on that road every morning, just with the current traffic from going from Firestone to Frederick, people going to get to the west side or even east side, I can sit there 15, 20 cars at a time just waiting to go by on a 2-lane road that is 55 miles an hour. And when you drive 55, you have people on your tail because you're not driving fast enough. And so I have not heard anything about traffic impact. I mean, we got the city of, this benefiting the city of Longmont coming onto our road into our community that we don't have to say in anything. We just get to just sit there and be impacted by this decision. I don't know what kind of traffic this is going to generate, but right now we've got, semi-trucks jake braking, we've got them coming in and out, and you got cars trying to pass semi-trucks. I mean, this is more than just wildlife, and I appreciate it. I mean, when we moved out there 26 years ago, the pond that's there with my folks parked at the time, 25 eagles sitting on it. 2 years ago, right along the Boulder Creek, there was probably, 12-something eagles that were like just there every day, flying around. We thought our cats were going to get snagged out off the harbor because there were so many. When you drive east this way, but still on 20 and a half, you've got ospreys. I mean, almost every pole has ospreys with babies on it right now. Going on 7, going north on Road 7. I mean, there's so much of an impact. Yes, we want to have compost, but it seems like if the city of Longmont is going to be the one benefiting, then it should be kind of affecting the city of Longmont, not us that are out there. Eventually, if this were to pass, those of you that voted for open space, out of sight, out of mind, because it's out of sight. It's out in the country. It's not in the city of Longmont, or where it would impact and be beneficial to the residents of Longmont. So that's just my insight on it, and thank you very much.
That's the last one we have signed up.
Okay.
So anybody else?
I'd like to say something. That's okay.
I think that's okay. Okay, so your name and address?
Sue Schlegel, we live at 1266 County Road 20 and a half, and my husband's family has farmed there for 60 years, and to your point, traffic is ridiculous, nobody talks about that. The devaluation of our properties, I don't even know what that's gonna do if they decide to have compost, and I think it's ridiculous that Boulder and Longmont want this, but they want to stick it in Long County. And without any input from us, this is our only platform to come say something, and so I'm representing our family. We have 3 members that live there now, soon to be 4, and none of us want this. We've been out there forever, we've been through the flood, and it's just not right. It's not right for people to come to do this. So.
Okay, if there's no further public comment, I'm going to turn it back, I'm going to close. I'm going to close, motion to close? Or just want to close? Close. Okay. Motion, right, okay. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to the board for any additional comments or questions.
You want to hear our opinions right now, or do you want us to vote?
I think we can discuss any items we think is necessary to discuss before we vote, but once we feel ready to vote, I will take a motion.
I just like to, there's been some different elements here where we've been overlapped with different programs, doing different assessments and all that. A big one that is on everyone's mind currently is actually traffic based. Was there any further input into this for the zero fatality plan that they're trying to put forward throughout all of them?
So, well, 20 and a half right now is not in the city, it's not in the city, it's in the jurisdiction of Well County. So it has not been included in the Vision Zero plan at this point in time. But anything that happens out on the property, like I said, we'll have to go through the Well County process, or for some reason we annex the property, then we'll have to go through the city process, and then the studies done at that time, traffic and intersection.
Yeah, a question about, there's kind of references to kind of precedent for disposition. If you could just clarify from the city perspective, is there any precedent for a first open space fund on the property being transferred to a different city fund? Or secondly, just intra-fund land swaps like this outside open space?
So just a little bit of history. The 1452 regulations came about after the city built Martin Street through what was the Dickens open space area. There wasn't a process at that point in time to do that, so there was right of way created through what was open space at that time. So since 1452 has been put in place in the code, my only knowledge is Austin Avenue, which is also right of way. So I think somebody mentioned that there has not been development associated with the change in open space. And as far as I know, that has not happened.
Is it common otherwise for other funds to transfer properties between different funds, or is that also common?
Also, a little history of if this is relevant or not. At one point in time, we had a department of Public Works and Natural Resources, so it was all one department. Included engineering, water, sewer, sanitation, storm drainage. So all those funds worked collectively together in one department. Since then, pardon?
About when was that? When did it change? When did it split up?
2 years ago, we created the Utilities and Public Works.
So it separated only 2 years ago.
And then the Natural Resources has been moving around and outside of Public Works and utilities. So it will become more common as development happens over properties owned by city funds that could be exchanged between different funds. Does that sound right? Yeah. as assistant city manager, I didn't want to put words in James' mouth.
No, I think Chris answered it well. I mean, one of the questions that came up was, about transferring from one fund to another, and why, or what does that look like? And it was noted very clearly that open space funds, come from basically money off the sales tax. Okay, so that's your funding source there. When you look at different enterprise funds, they're really utility funds, like water or electric or wastewater sanitation. Their funding streams are also very distinct because those come from user charges, money that they're charging for a service. And so, especially as Harold had said, even at City Council, is that you cannot start moving those monies around, meaning I can't start charging for a service at sanitation, picking up the trash, and use those to just arbitrarily buy open space for open space purposes. Okay, we talked about where there is some property owned, for a broad purpose. And so it sort of circles back to where you have open space funds to, go out and purchase, open space for those purposes. I think the challenge is that we have an amazing inventory of open space and conservation easements and some other funds that have also bought lands in there that have helped on the buffering. And the other challenge with that is, where additional properties become available and maybe there isn't sufficient funding. So for case in point, the Bigelow property. I think there was some discussion in earlier meetings, wouldn't that be appropriate for open space to pick up? And the challenge is that open space has wisely used its funds, which also means that there isn't this large cache of funds sitting there. And, you'll have more funds over time, with the extension of the sales tax. But back to maybe the fundamental question is, you cannot start taking funds or monies from these enterprise funds and start to use it for other purposes outside of those funds.
Is the money for Bigelow coming from an enterprise fund?
It's coming half from the general fund and half from the sanitation fund. And so, yeah.
So does that mean that there's no way that sanitation and that public works and utilities could kind of quote, pay back the imbalance of the funds that, like, where open space purchase, and then now it's industrial use, and there's no way for them to pay back? Am I getting this right? I'm trying to put your words into my thoughts to see if I can get this.
Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the original purchase monies is that the utilities paid more ultimately per acre.
Yes. The total property was more expensive per acre than the district property was.
Okay.
Any questions, or just someone want to make a motion?
I do have one question. I think in our notes, they talked about the Boulder County compost feasibility study being available at the end of this month, but then we heard that maybe it's delayed.
So the county is phasing it, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody out there, but I think the report, I misconstrued that they had 3 phases, actually 2 phases. The first phase they presented in February, and I believe that they are issuing a report on that first phase around the end of this month.
No.
And the first phase into this one.
And then the remainder of the study will come out towards the end of the year.
I guess my follow-up question is, why can't we wait until we have that information?
We certainly can, but to Harold's big ugly machine throwing balls all around, there's a lot of things that are out there that you're trying to do the lease renewal with Wholesome, which has a lot of different pieces and parts to it. There are other things there. I can never remember the full scope of everything that's happening all out there, but there's timing issues with other things that are happening as well that it makes the most sense right now to do the exchange.
Well, I was going to say, to that point, to meet the net public benefit, I don't think the handful of acres meets the benefit statement. Otherwise, we don't have anything really in exchange for just disposing of open space land if you don't have an actual proposal to use it in a solid way, right? Like we're talking about the idea that it could potentially be a composting facility, but if it isn't, we're making a decision on open space land without that assurance. And so I don't think it meets the standard that's in 1452.
You can disagree with me. I'm not trying to tell you that you have to do everything that I'm telling you, but our intent as we brought this forward was to increase the amount of open space land there, provide for water for other open space that we do not have today, that we're paying lease rates on every year in order to maintain the agricultural use on those properties. There's potential for connection to other communities, for trails and other benefits. And we're also trying to keep whatever industrial uses that we have outside of that half mile for eagles, as well as keeping it away from the creek riparian area and also the sea.
Would the city be open on on all of these contingencies as part of the exchange? Like that the full disclosure which had for the plan for toll be in the plan, as well as there's been a lot of other discussion of other industrial uses of the distal property other than a composting facility, which hasn't really been brought up by city members, but city council members, but limiting it to just that. So limiting the 65 acres to only the composting facility. The fire center, CDL driving, all these other things, and have been
That's a question for city council. I can't make that determination. Simply take the city council, if you want to put that in your motion, it's reserved for one purpose. That seems to limit the ability for the funds to be able to meet their needs in the future.
Could you speak up, please? We can't hear you.
Okay, yes, I will.
Thank you.
I guess I'm glad you asked the question first, because I think so use of the south side or just the side. With this land swap, the way it's written, unless council places conditions on it, it's essentially unconditional. So the point of it's a net gain of acreage, arguably higher quality habitat, more riparian setback, further buffer to the nests, so on, connectivity, buffer to the private communities that you could listed. So if we're just looking at it from an open space benefit standpoint, there's nothing necessarily in our recommendations that or council's decision that says it's only going to happen if the compost facility happens, but if the land swap will happen regardless.
Like I said, you can make a recommendation, you can put in your motion that you recommend to council that it be for only one purpose and then revert if that's the case.
For what? I couldn't hear that.
So you can make your motion however you would like. It can include reversionary language, it can include exclusive use of the property, but that's your recommendation as a board to the council. It's up to the council to make that determination as to whether they want to carry that through or not. Staff will make the point that the utilities did pay for a portion of property out there for certain uses, and that if we were limited in that use, that we may need to look at something different moving forward.
So I see this beautiful rendering here of like new ponds. This is like finally where it will be in 20 years. But I don't see any space for that connecting trail that we're hearing. Like, I don't see that there's actually any space there. And obviously, we know you can't ride your bike or walk on that road. There's no way. I've been on the road. There's no way. You'd die. I don't even know how you guys have cats. Like,
They die.
yeah, they die. Yeah, I mean, I see dead cats on it. It's really sad. But there's no way for a trailer there. Like, where's that, like, so if you're gonna dangle something big and beautiful in front of us, I don't see it. I don't see it, even in the rendering. There should have been something about a trailer, you know? I don't see where that is.
So in our discussions as staff, that would be something that we work with the surrounding communities with, and I don't know if Natural Resources would like to address that for future trails.
The thought around trails is not a developed thought. There's no plan to necessarily put a trail on this property. It's just been said more broadly that we have, community to the north and community to the south that potentially could be connected through this area, if that makes sense. But there's no plan. There's nothing on the table. There's no plan for that.
Thank you. That makes it very clear.
Any other comments, questions from the board?
I just have one. I'm curious what it sounds like there's a water lease that we're paying. It's probably expensive and all these things to keep other lands watered and all that right now. What is and those are things that would presumably continue on for a while regardless of the decision. So that's not really something that's going to change quickly. What is the immediate, I guess, for lack of a better term, punishment for not getting a decision in front of you that's moves one direction or the other? Is there some immediate negative impacts to the community as a whole, to anything for not getting something before we get all of the ducks in a row?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think probably one of maybe the most important thing we can do is make sure that your opinion is heard with the city council. Okay? So a decision or referral or some information more formally back to city council helps at least, takes your time and the input that you have, move forward in a substantial way that can be heard. So at this moment in time, we are bringing information back from the board in July, late July. And that information could be a recommendation for, it could be a recommendation against, it could be something else that you might say, because basically city council has referred this to CRAP. And so, the hope behind that is that then CRAP will provide feedback in some form. And so to delay, I think it's just in your best interest to have at least some information moving forward to council. Because council can move forward with or without that information. So with the time that you've done and the time that the public has been here, it would probably be helpful to at least have something that comes back to council.
Just ask a follow-up question. Were you asking specifically for any of the other things we talked about, if they could not happen, if we don't move forward with this? Is that the question?
I guess that's an expansion on that, yes, that would.
So, what Harold laid out, all those pieces are interconnected for all the different things happening. Earl Thomas all the way through to this property. What we do here tonight, talking about open space and public works and utilities, will inform how the city moves forward with negotiations with Folsom, which will have an impact on the mining at Earl Thomas, and also the ability to include mining at north of the railroad tracks and north of St. Vrain, adjacent to the wastewater plant. So there's all these interconnected things, so it's a difficult question to answer. If we don't do a land swap at this point in time, there are impacts to a lot of different things. We'll have to pivot and change course on a lot of different things, and ultimately, whatever we're planning will be extended out further into the future.
And if I can add as a follow-up to your question, Mr. Davis, I was just re-looking at section 452, the process side of this. And under the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board recommendation, item number 4 says the CRAB shall forward its recommendations to the City Council following the public hearing. And so the public hearing has been held. And so back to, again, actions that you take as the board. I don't want to, try and influence you either way other than, every voice heard.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question?
I'm so sorry.
The point that was made back in February, you tabled or continued the public hearing, so you could continue this public hearing tonight and gain you some more time, and you have 60 days to do that. So I think that was a little bit misleading what the assistant city manager said.
That's not what the language says. 60 days is related to from the time the council refers it to the board shall hold a hearing. That's the only requirement.
You can be open it within 60 days. You could continue.
Yeah, my suggestion would be that we consider whether additional information is available that would change anybody's opinion that they'd like to forward to council. A number of things that we've asked about around, a traffic study or the environmental impact of something or the ground conditions, as I think we're discussed at length, will be part of the development proposal that is not yet in front of us. And it's not something that we're going to get in 60 days. There's more information, is my opinion. So I think my thought process is there information that I'm looking for that would materially change my opinion about this recommendation? I would ask all you to think the same before we look at continuing something unnecessarily.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
I have one other comment.
You did close the public hearing, so if you want to take this up again, it will need to go through the posting and all the process that we did this evening. There is a risk that council has asked for this to come back on July 22nd. Your next meeting is not until the 14th, and generally staff is required to have info available and ready to go 2 weeks prior to the meeting. So there is a risk that you might not be heard if you delay.
Correct. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, just go ahead, Sean.
This is a manager, Hornbarger. Tell us a little bit about the sort of fiscal impact this has. Heard about the environmental, heard about traffic, and the cost benefit analysis of transferring. Can you tell us, is there any gain or loss to the community if we postpone, other than the staff time?
Let me contemplate that. Because you're talking more near term versus long term. So near term, like I said, there's whatever staff time is necessary associated with it. I'm not thinking of a direct fiscal impact.
I'm not sure that there's a near-term impact necessarily, but long-term there would be fiscal impact. Composting in and of itself is very expensive for the city to pay for it to be hauled at this point in time.
But that's not a guarantee based on the county's second phase study. So regardless, if this board made to Mr. Friesner's point, the board made a recommendation that they felt that they could give a better analysis of the problem after the county's second phase report was submitted. That's not being December or whatever is not considered long-term, it's considered near-term, correct? Is that how we?
Yeah, because I'm thinking if the county's information is towards the end of the year, I'm thinking broadly from a city perspective, if you go back to earlier in the presentation, there's a cute little graphic. But there's a lot of things going on, and part of it is, how we have this existing facility, Wholesome facility that's doing other mining in the area and has a lease with the city to do that. And then there's certain terms and conditions, and what we're doing is trying to negotiate that lease to further benefit the city and to do some of the things we talked about, and trying to reclaim some of the open space property sooner as part of the requirement for Wholesome and so forth. So I think it could affect a little bit at least how and what we do, and maybe what we can benefit the city from to the fullest extent possible. But I'm not here to say that that's really have direct financial impact.
I can tell the board from my perspective, when I supported moving it on to you, there was an impression that the report would be in sooner than later, so the idea that these would somehow mesh and coincide was my hope, and then shortly afterwards we found that that was not the case, but that's where we are right now.
We don't know. Like, what I want to know is why we can't put that in part of our contract right now with Folsom, that we move forward with reclaiming, because all of it's going to need to be reclaimed. This whole, the whole place, it's a mess. It all needs to be reclaimed, and why can't we put forward, start cleaning up, like clean up as you cook, like we all do, and put it forward as part of the contract, whether or not we appease the city manager with yes vote, that we should.
Well, I appreciate that comment. In the interest of time, we're not discussing the contract disposal, we're discussing the disposition of open space, so I just want to keep us.
I mean, we're kind of, but it's all been like that with compost,
Yeah,
we're
no,
talking about
I-
compost, all that stuff, but we can, so they keep saying like, okay, if you don't, now, they're saying that if we don't vote now, or whatever, then we won't be able to negotiate that in, like, quick reclamation. So it's just one of those things that's put out there as like, this is what you can do. I'm just a little more abrupt than the other people and less political.
I have one question about the composting, even though it's hypothetical. Looks like from our notes that there's like a new type of composting that you all want to look at putting on that property, which looked pretty exciting, but it's only 8 acres. Is that even gonna be big enough to support Boulder County? Because Boulder County is pretty big. So when we talk about this feasibility, we are also talking about will it get chosen? And 8 acres doesn't seem big enough to compost what Boulder County needs. Do we get priority as the city of Longmont? Like, there's just so many hypothetical things. Do you know if that would be a big enough site for Boulder County?
So I don't know for sure, but my understanding is that staff went out to Chula Vista and saw a site that was on 5 acres, but it is surrounded by a landfill. So I don't know what operations are separate from composting itself, but they're serving over 400,000 residents at that site. So I think that we could be able to serve Boulder County in the same manner.
And where was it? This site?
Chula Vista, California.
Okay. So what about our winter and our seasons?
that's something that we have to continue to look at. That they have answers for those types of things, but I don't know.
Just a comment, I think, just to try to maybe center us on what we've been asked to review by council and talk a bit about that. And then I think talk about my perspective and what I would hope to make a motion on, and maybe talk about what motion somebody would vote on, not just that we're gonna vote, because we did have a motion in one direction. I think the request from council to give feedback, is exactly resulting in this kind of discussion and the public input we're having. Our response is a recommendation, or a recommendation for or against, or with conditions or with suggestions, not a decision to proceed with a land swap or with campus facility. That lies with council. And there will be another public meeting, much like this one, with many, I assume, of the same people speaking again with council, with people who will make that choice, which is not us. This recommendation is really about how to inform that discussion, and maybe, in my mind, guide that towards important topics that council could choose to condition that swap on, or suggest back to the county, or ask for more information, whatever it might be. And as I listen to the report from the city, my mental model for thinking about this is that when this was originally purchased, it sounds like, first of all, it's easy to say in retrospect, of course, but the city didn't necessarily have an option to buy the tall property with open space funds, given the cost of that property. And there was a choice to buy this property at a certain price per dollar based on the funds that were available. Not a lot of intentionality beyond it's nice to have contiguity with our open space. And I found the description of the additional benefits of the open space being moved to Tull and then reclaimed more quickly to be a pretty compelling example of a net benefit to that space. So I'm fairly supportive of the idea. Again, I think all the topics that were raised are questions that will come up in the, I assume, many public hearings that would happen going forward with their proposal to do this, as well as the review of the report from the county. So I'm just trying to keep our focus kind of constrained to that open space disposition question, the net benefit to the open space program, and then remembering how that was originally purchased. And there are a number of things that I could suggest recommending with a motion, but I'd like to know where the board is at before motioning something that's not really aware. Yeah.
Can we do an informal straw?
For motions, fine, if somebody feels strongly.
I mean, does it mean, can we have an actual conversation and just pretend nobody else is in here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because like, that's what we should do.
Yeah, that's the discussion.
Precedent. I mean, that is the one, I love composting, I love fighting climate change. Precedent, it's so big. It's so big. We open this can of worms, there's gonna be, I mean, there's already housing everywhere, there's already, like, it's crazy. It's a big can of worms. And it's being open to all over the nation, and we can't be part of it. I won't be part of it.
I think this meeting is evidence of the discussion that would happen for any further chance like that.
Yeah.
I mean, this is how much we're discussing a transfer of a asphalt processing site and gravel processing site, right? We're not talking about transferring Macintosh Lake to be developed as a ski resort, right?
Until we get it.
And so I think this is like a high degree of, high burden of proof for this board to be reviewing that, and it is a precedent, I agree. But I think that this is evidence of the process in place being connected with that. And it's not something that I would, well, I can't say that. People would say that that's the point of it, is it can happen more often, but if it's never happened in the history of the fund, and it's not happening now, I don't know that it's that likely to happen again.
I wrote what Chris said, though. Chris said the exchange could and would become more common. That's the quote. I wrote it down right as he said it.
Not necessarily because of this choice, but because of pressures on the community to meet all of the needs.
Right, but
I am inclined to agree with Mr. Libby on the quality of the open space in question and the exchange of open space and environmental planning. I try to take this pretty seriously, and I do think just at face value the net benefit of the environmental benefits given to us by reclaiming and taking land and all, and kind of regardless of what happens when it's out inside of the facility. And also to Mr. Libby's point, there are special use permits and public hearings and neighborhood hearings and traffic impact studies and phase 2 environmental studies. They'll be considered and reviewed by the other appropriate authorities. Kind of our job is to look at this strictly in the disposition of open space, and I do see the benefit in terms of I'll have even more habitat, increased buffer to the eagle's nest, opportunity for water storage, increased riparian setback on both properties. We're looking at, getting a 750-foot setback opposed to a required 150, which you wouldn't necessarily get with some of the considerations being given in this scenario. So just strictly it's 150 feet, right? So I do think staff we're charged to come up with something that meets the intent of the open space. Any thoughts from this side of the table?
I would just add the kind of things I would ask the council to look at in a recommendation beyond just proceeding, but saying proceeding with some topics to look really closely at would be things like, are there ways to increase the total open space acres that are resulting in this scenario? I don't really understand why 3.5% of exchange is allowed, but not 25% or 60%. And I do think resulting in 300 open space acres is materially different than a much smaller amount. So I'd like to understand that and suggest looking at options for that. I think we often hear there's not money available, but seeing the Bigelow property get purchased on a single vote with $600,000 of funds seems to me like there is money available for the right things. So looking at ways to spend money that would mitigate some of the concerns that the public have raised around wildlife or around access or traffic, there is potential to spend time on that. So
it's 8:30. I don't know if we can budge a little bit and take a vote without extending, or do we have to vote to extend?
I think you should vote to extend.
Okay.
yeah, I move to extend the meeting to 9 o'clock. To 9 o'clock. Yep.
Mr. Libby first, Ms. Rhea second. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Just some topics I think that could be suggestions to look really strongly at for council or for staff to bring to council as part of this is ways to further sweeten the deal, so to speak, and that this is up to the choice of how the city presents it.
Would a change in acreage of the land swap require it to be referred for discussion? Is it our scenario 3 is what we're making a recommendation on? Can we make a recommendation on scenario 3 with additional precautions?
Things like whatever we want. It's up to them to figure out a deal with it.
Any discussion from this side?
I also don't know if I agree that it's a net benefit at this point, with having so much ambiguity on everything. And I also think that part 2A of that process document, the disposal should be sensitive to the integrity of the property features, including sensitive habitat and cultural and historical features, and generally should not adversely affect the remainder of the property. We don't know that. Like, we don't have any information to assess that. So I don't feel comfortable saying yes to something when I don't know the environmental impacts. I don't know the impacts on our neighbors and our community. And I just don't think it meets the burden of proof that it is a good swamp.
What do you guys think, well, I'm sorry.
My concern is the other 57 acres that we're talking about. Right? So
That's exactly.
because that's to be used by utilities to make it worthwhile for them to exchange this land, right?
Mm-hmm.
We haven't really talked about what those 57 acres are being used for. That would impact traffic and the environment and anybody else in that area. So net benefit is great that we have more net land, but they don't want this whole property at all anyway. It may just go that way anyway. It's the ease of use of being able to industrialize what is like nice things and flat industrial space. And so I don't like the fact that I don't know what that 57 acres is going to be used for. So this high impact space that
Want to make a motion? I don't know that everyone's going to agree on any one motion regardless.
And hopefully city council sitting here has heard all of our voices as well. I mean, I really just hope that we've heard our voices and heard the community and take that into consideration no matter how this vote goes.
I think, well, I agree. I don't think they have to watch the report this meeting necessarily, so speaking out at this council meeting when it was reviewed for all of us would be good. I think if you're interested in passing it along. I'm sure most people here will speak at that meeting in public, but it's better to give that feedback directly.
We do have a meeting usually once a month about what's going on with the boards and commissions that we serve on. And I certainly will convey my, observations and what I'm hearing from you. I'm hoping that you'll come with a motion that makes it easy for us to have this conversation further down the line there, and after we get more information.
Yeah, I'll try a motion. I would move that the Parks and Rec Advisory Board recommend to the City Council to cautiously proceed with this potential land swap. Noting that there was significant disagreement on the crowd board and discussion around various concerns, and suggesting that they look at several areas, particularly to improve the proposal or scenario, or mitigate some of the concerns raised by the public. Specifically related to the overall acreage of open space and trying to increase that amount. Looking at the wildlife concerns that were raised, anything that could be done to mitigate those more specifically. And really reviewing the many questions that were brought up that, while they pertain more to the development phase of an actual project, are things that the council can choose to make constraints on the property in the future. So that's where I'm at, is I think our recommendation is that we're in the middle. So that's the motion. With motion as it is. Just to cautiously proceed with those recommended topics for review and further staff review for the council and then discussion with the council.
Do I get any second to cautiously move ahead?
It's okay.
Questions?
So you're driving?
Motion is like to make.
And I can't make them pretty like everybody else. It's just not in my nature. I move that we ask City Council to reject the land swap. And they can bring it back to us if they got something better.
Thank you. Do I have a second recommendation to reject and be referred if they come with an alternative plan?
Could you just recite what the motion would be?
She's made a motion to recommend to City Council to reject the land swap.
Yeah.
And re-refer it to us if they come up with a preferable alternative addressing.
Right, or if they got something better. I think it's
I'm
fine.
trying to find a nicer way to say it.
Nicer, but you know what? They understand that.
Yeah.
They understand that. We could put it in language that.
That better meets the standards of 4.52.
Yeah, but we could, that better meets the standards of 4.52.
With that language.
Can I, without a second, it's not really pertinent, but just we need to reconsider the land swap with these, like, a lot of the concessions that Sam has put forward, and the concessions that were defined by staff. I mean, until things are like, those things are defined, I think that's what we need to advise council on, is that it's the proper use of the space, what is the net benefit that, we can really recommend, and, the net total benefit of, talk.
Before comment, if that's okay, we have a motion to reject. If there's not a second, I would recommend we make it another motion to reconsider perhaps, if that's not. There's not a second for that.
Yeah, kind of building off of old ideas. I think that we make a motion to the city council to reject the land proposal as it's currently written. until such a time that the land proposal can prove a net benefit to the open space program. And we define a net benefit and is more in line with 1452A2 to be sensitive to the integrity of the property features, including sensitive habitat and cultural and historical features, and generally should not adversely affect the remainder of the property, which has yet to be proven.
If you'd like, you can state the motion and see if it
That's
is.
I'll state that as a motion.
So I'll try and restate.
Yeah,
that.
restate it.
Mr. Hess has made a motion to reject, the council recommends, the council reject the land swap as written until they can prove a net benefit, which proves it's sensitive to the integrity and the continuation of the sentence in 1452.
Yeah.
I didn't write it down.
Yeah.
Do we have a second motion to reject as written until they can further prove they've met the standards of 1452 in terms of environmental benefits? Only one.
So we could put another one.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask a quick question. Is that language, I'm just trying to think through it, does that language create an exclusivity that if they get to a certain level of proof, that it automates it?
And then would refer back.
Yes.
And then, they would have to re-refer back to us.
And then
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
To evaluate
Yeah.
the new
Okay.
standard against.
I mean, we can't make them re-refer it back to us, but they can
We
make a
can
recommendation.
recommend.
Yeah, you gotta find a loophole.
So if we could ask for a second for that amendment, so we refer.
Yes.
Is that a yes, a second?
Yes, I could second.
Did you catch it, James?
No,
So the amendment to her motion was to reject the land swap as written until council can further, can further prove a net benefit meeting the standards of 1452 and re-refer to Parks and Recreation Board once that has been approved. Like, we can only recommend that they do that.
With a recommendation to bring it back to that.
So that would be a first, Mr. Reyes, second, Mr. Davis.
Yes.
All those in favor? Okay. That's not quite a quorum.
Okay. Well, do you have all those opposed? I would like to see all those opposed.
All those opposed, it's opposed, yeah.
Yeah. I thought maybe
What's missing?
Yeah, see, I think
Yes.
it's that thing. There are parts that I would like to recommend to city council. I think what the writing is like not complete. I mean, I agree with Sam that like this is only part of the process, not a full process. And so we can reject things, but I think we need to have informed meetings on this or whatever. And so to then not use the time and input that we have for those meetings to help inform council, I think is a waste of time and resources. So I would like to include, other things that others here on the board would like to recommend to council to see what's in there that would help.
Yeah, more specific recommendations.
Right, yeah.
Because the way it's written, they would leave it to recommended, right? So what do we see? That we don't see, that we don't see, that you would see that would theoretically change your vote next time.
I changed my vote. I mean, pinky swear that you're never gonna do this again. Never, like, I just, you can't say it's open space and then yank the rug out. You just can't do it. And that was a reluctant vote, yes, because it gave that loophole for them. You just can't do it. It is public trust. My job is protect what my neighbors said, what my neighbors voted for. You just can't do it. As beautiful as it looks.
Right now, you have a motion that has been approved at 3 votes to 2.
We just got abstaining.
You cannot, can you abstain?
Can you abstain?
Our city council does not allow that.
Yeah, to get a quorum. So it's gonna take 5.
I think it's time.
Well, but she's researching, it's just, you know.
It says.
I do agree, though, I think we should put more forward.
Would you agree, Scott, with her?
We don't have any motions for that.
Let's see what James says about 3 carrying vote.
More
So
research.
a majority of the president will be abstaining.
Just while we're researching, I think that's still, motion's on the floor and waiting for info on the vote. I think that's it.
Yeah.
We could also motion to make no recommendation other than that the board is basically on our belief and thoughts on this. And motion additional areas for comment.
We can also make further recommendations.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be a binary, it's one side.
Yeah, because I feel like we're not that hung.
Sure.
I feel like we agree
So maybe
more
motion.
than we disagree. I just can't get there, right there, but we agree more than we disagree. It's like it's arguing over, you know, terminology and things like that. We agree more than we disagree. We agree that we don't like the slant swap right now, how it is. We all agree on that. But it's,
I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
You don't agree with
Sam
that?
and I are dissenting.
okay,
I think
okay. What do you say to people who say, you know, you're setting precedent? What do you say to that?
I think similar to what Sam said, is that he goes through its process as aligned in the municipal code and is considered on the merits of that argument. And that's what.
But I argue that we're part of the process, and so if it gets stopped at us, I think that's also something stopping.
I would just say we're not stopping it. That's the point I'm making. It's like a
we're not
recommendation.
stopping it,
Yeah.
we can't stop
Right.
it. But we can give voice to what we're heard. And I think that what we've heard is we don't know if there's really a net benefit, and that has not been proven yet. And that we need more information, but we can't table it for 6 months because of all the other stuff. So as it's written, I think at this moment I would say no. However, it's not that the door is closed, and we don't actually get to make the final determination, so. But it's us saying, hey, maybe slow down a little bit, this is feeling rushed. And there are some really legitimate concerns going on, and we have heard it, and we also have concerns.
I think should the motion that was just made pass, that is rejection as written, asking it to come back to better meet it is kind of saying what you said to council, as you've heard. The staff's point though, there might be an opportunity to more clearly define what that means, but let's see what those are first.
And what would people like? What's your wish list?
Well, I mean, it means it clears up, it's easier than just reject it. So, just do that.
If you want to see, let's see what she says really quick, and then we'll go from there.
So this, in either way, it works the same direction, is that we want to inform council that it's a real mixed bag. And in the best case scenario, we don't have an answer for most of the industrial use of the property. And because of that, we don't know it's a benefit.
Might have a verdict?
Yeah, so Scott does not have to vote,
Okay.
and the majority would be 3 to 2, and that would pass.
Unless Scott wants to vote, because we just put it out there and Scott's there.
I think he's already abstained.
So it already
Yeah, well, so with that, we have 3 to 2, 1 abstaining to make a recommendation to council to reject the land swap as written. until they can prove the net benefit to the details of the sensitive to habitat and environmental conditions as listed in the second part of 1452, and then refer it to council. That's the amendment. Yes.
Passed.
Okay.
We're good.
Alright. Alright, with that.
I'll move to adjourn.
Got a motion to adjourn. A second?
I moved that we all had a glass of wine, so dearly